It's how the world moves. Let's listen to that. And so the dark, it's challenging, but it also creates the opportunity for a reemergence, for a new day to begin each day.
Welcome to Back to the Future podcast. My name is Victor Sadia, and I talk with brilliant minds and hearts of people who want to uproot and transform the current health and wellness paradigm. Dr. Patrick Hanaway is a family physician and leader in functional medicine. He served as Chief Medical Education Officer at the Institute for Functional Medicine and as Founding Research Director at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. Following his recovery from stage 4 cancer through an integrative approach, he incorporates both modern and indigenous healing practices into his work, drawing on his initiation as Maracame by the Huichol people of Mexico. In this episode, Dr. Hanaway shares his transformative journey from doctor to healer, reflecting on the profound interplay between science and spirituality in medicine. We explore the importance of uncertainty as a source of aliveness, the evolving paradigms in functional and lifestyle medicine, and the challenges and opportunities of building institutions for holistic health. Patrick delves into the metabolic theory of cancer, offering a deeply personal perspective on how imbalance manifests in the body and society, and emphasizes the need to reconnect with the sacred in medicine through practices like fire ceremonies and community rituals. This conversation invites us to reimagine healing, not as fixing, but as creating balance, insight, and connection in every aspect of life. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we have Dr. Patrick Hanaway. Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Victor.
So before we begin our conversation, I just wanted to bring to mind and bring to heart all the things that make a happening such as this one possible. You know, the amount of beings that live in us, through us, that we are them. And these magical things that we don't comprehend really make us who we are and allow this interconnection possible. So I honor that. And I will also like to invite you to say a few words on that magical thing that happens and allows for us to keep creating magic.
We've had a little bit of this conversation, and for me, it's not so much magic. It's all magic, and in that way, but it's not magical at all. It's the way life is and unfolds, and it's about the relationship to all of those beings, to the microbes within us, the microbes within the earth that help to give us the food, the beings that provide water and rain and the sun, the light, and the opportunity to live, and having gratitude for being able to be in this world. I mentioned to you one time, I said the line from a song, it says an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So yes, gratitude for being able to connect today in this way.
Thank you, and I feel honored to be your friend. I think we have connected in such a powerful way, and I appreciate you for allowing me to be me in front of you. And I also want to thank myself in that sense for being brave and to send you a text and invite you to this conversation. I wanted to begin with a question regarding your when you were a little kid, little Patrick that knew that he wanted to be a doctor. Like, he always knew that he wanted to be a doctor. Where does that came from? And how do you see that little Patrick? What were his expectations when he said that he wanted to be a doctor?
I've told you that story, and I've not really taken the time to reflect into that little boy. That 5-year-old boy who knew that. I've often when I've reflected on it more from an intellectual standpoint. My mother's a nurse. My father's a lawyer. He's a professional. Seeing the doctor as a little kid, having recurrent ear infections, being hospitalized, having my tonsils taken out, and seeing sort of the power of that whole phenomena. I'm sure all of those things informed it, but I also think it was informed by something deeper and before that, something karmic, if you will, that that informed service, and being of service. And I found out, like, in my journey with cancer, that I needed to be in order to value myself, I needed to be valued by others, and that became a conduit for doing that. I mean, so there's actually a shadow side to it as well. And so it's many different aspects that are there. But all I knew was I wanted to do that. And in a typical way of, let's say, in the mid 60s, for Christmas, I got a microscope, and it's like thinking about it as science, and relating to all of medicine as science and technical, rather than in relationship. And that's been the learning of a lifetime, is about relationship to myself and each other, and all beings, and the sacred.
I was in a retreat a few months ago, and it struck me at one moment where I was seeing the retreat facilitator engaging with the group in a very healing session. And I had this feeling of, oh, I would love to be able to do that, right? Almost as if it were like a calling, a karmic calling. And it's funny because it's not to be the healer, but to be able to create a space for healing to happen. That was more of the calling, rather than the profession or the title or the leader of the retreat. And I'm thinking about this Patrick as a kid who did see that as a title, as being similar to its parents, but at the same time, this deeper calling to probably provide some sort of healing. And I think you make a very good distinction, or I should say, even an evolution of the word doctor to healer, where you are allowing yourself to call yourself a healer by your own definition, right? What are these instances which are the words that you relate to being a healer, and why do you choose also that identity, and you keep evolving it?
Well, the word doctor, is, like, from the Latin docere, to teach, and to do that. And I certainly have done that. Have had in my career the awareness of that when I share what I have learned in my perspective with my colleagues, and they apply it, they have benefits as well. So I began to learn that, oh, there's something there that is beyond just me, and that relationship with an individual. And so I spent a lot of time, 25 years, working with that craft of teaching and bringing forward as well. But as I shared, at the beautiful conference we had in October, the journey for me also was one of being called, to a system, an approach, a view that was about how to help my people be whole, be complete. Body, mind, spirit, all those aspects together. And that's not what Western medicine is about. And I have a view that I don't think Western medicine can get there. I think it has to move into a much broader view in order to be able to incorporate wholeness into it. And so that word is the most important one. And the other word is about then relationship and connection. But it's not relationship just to the individual, it's relationship to the living world, and being aware of and present with its communicating and talking, all the time. All the time. And how do I work with that to help an individual to move, towards balance, towards wholeness, towards integration, and knowing that it's a goal. It's not an endpoint. It's a journey that we're on. And it's not like, ding, I rang the bell, I'm whole, done, game over. No, because as soon as we reach even close to that, then something happens. You've heard me say, we remember and then we forget. And it's the human condition. So those are the ways in which, my work, my calling as a healer, is to help both individuals. And I'm also, underneath it, trying to be in conversations that are like, how do we do that more broadly for our people? How do we give a view that is around the social conditioning is one that we also have the opportunity, in fact, the need to move through because our people right now are in a very difficult time. And there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of reactivity in that fear that's going on. And that's not going to help us to be in a place of wholeness and acceptance and balance of all of our emotions as they arise. That's the way in which the world works. There's a movement that occurs, and that dynamic movement is an important consideration. It's not like, oh, there's fear, let's suppress it. There's fear, let's, fight, flight, freeze, appease. No, there's fear. Being present with that, but allowing that to emerge into courage, to allow that to go forward. Like it's hard to do, but it's actually important and it's part of the human condition. And we can look back and say like, wow, it seems like it's really hard right now. And, I imagine that if people, from 2 or 3 thousand years ago were looking at what we have, they'd be like, what do you mean? It's like you got food, you've got clothing, you've got shelter, you've got opportunities, you've got all of these things that you're taking for granted. And, there's not a, saber-toothed tiger at the door who's already eaten half of your family and is ready to eat the rest of it. Like we still live in times where there's unbelievable abundance. And I love the word abundance in the Saligi or Cherokee tradition in learning from them, where abundance means having enough. That's very different than my Western view of abundance.
Yeah. Yeah. Abundance has a connotation of quantity, of a lot of something.
Right.
Mhm. I love that too. And let me ask you this: how does that calling to be a healer, to bring wholeness to your people, feel in your body? The calling itself, how does that feel in your body?
Oh, it's quite exhilarating. The calling is exhilarating. It's like, wow, this is incredible. This is beautiful. What a gift. What an opportunity. So when it first arises, and then, as we have, there's that arising, and then okay, so how do I move from awareness into practice? Okay, now I'm not sure what to do. And so there's like, okay, I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to sort. But as I practice, as I have experiences in doing it and seeing where I fail and seeing where I become overwhelmed and seeing, feeling like, oh, cynical or, it's never going to happen. But continuing to say, okay, reaching and asking for the help and support of, friends and family and the gods and the sacred sites and each of that to be able to help support me. I have mentioned at one point in time, when I had cancer and I had to ask for help and I started asking for help in bigger ways than I ever had. And I felt like, oh my God, I had no idea there was so much help, so much support from all the beings in all the realms and friends and family. And it was just like it was there everywhere. And it was my job then to say, okay, you're going to receive it. You're going to open yourself up and receive that. And it might not come in the way you think it's going to come or you want it to come, but it's there. Are you ready to receive? That begins that exchange. And through that process, from awareness to practice, then into embodiment. Okay, how do I begin to embody this? That is the goal in my life, is to be able to embody that aspect of healing and being a healer.
Two things from that. One is how much of your identity you had to negotiate with peers, with colleagues, with other doctors, that you wanted to embody a different way of being a doctor, right? And you had to negotiate a new identity that it was full of uncertainty, obviously, because you didn't know exactly what that means. And even being a healer implies being in a constant space of uncertainty. It's not that you were able after a few years to understand what does that mean. So yeah, what part of your identity had to be negotiated, and how much of that negotiation was even healing, not only obviously to you to jump into that uncertainty, but to others who were seeing you take that courageous step into the unknown?
Well, it's a really big question, and I don't know the answer, so I just want to share some of the journey around it because what I've found in the tradition that I've been initiated in of the Vedanta people and the Sierra Madres, a Marakame, one who knows, and that means knowing what you don't know, also is about walking in both worlds, walking in the world of human beings and walking in the world of the gods, of the divine expressions that are there. And that's a goal. And so my name in that tradition, Urutamai, that I was given means, beautiful new arrow. The arrow is taking the prayers to the sacred sites and to the divine beings, and again, that's aspirational. My last name Hanaway in Gaelic it means thunder. So I'm like, okay, well, there's some disruptive forces that are in there, but the aspect of, when I went to medical school, I thought I was going to be learning about health and wellness. And when I wasn't, I was surprised. Was I surprised? I don't know. I just thought that's what it would be. So I continued to work to understand, to integrate that. But I knew that I had to be in conversation with, the teachers with the dominant paradigm through that whole process. So it's always been a dialogue. And how do I move that? But what that's required is or the way I approach that is like, okay, well, like in a debate, so then I can actually have a conversation and it can grow. That's a different view. But so then I went to, I worked in the CDC and I did scientific research and I went into family medicine and then worked in the pueblos in New Mexico. And, the doctors there who I respected so much, who'd been doing this work for 15 or 30 years. And I was fresh out of my training. And they said, oh, if you really want to learn, you need to go to the bush, what they call in the United States, the bush, in that setting. And so I moved to the Bering Sea, with my wife and my 6-month-old child. And we worked there and it was very difficult. And I learned so much about myself and about people. And I learned how to be, like the best doctor, and I needed that so that I could leave it behind. It's like, I can do that. And I don't want to do that. I want to do something that focuses on health and well-being and taking time and listening to people. So there was stepping out, but I never stepped out so far as to point at the others and say you're doing it wrong. It's like this is an additional view on top of what you do. And it's integrating things and being in conversations. And, I found that some conversations, with local doctors, they're like, oh, you're practicing witchcraft or voodoo, even as functional medicine. But I could have a conversation with the head of gastroenterology or ophthalmology at Harvard, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're right. You totally understand this, and let's work together." So I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. There's different people, different relationships, and it evolved. Now, that's all in the realm of integrative functional medicine, which is really a translational aspect of trying to listen to what's going on clinically and how to move with new ideas and really listen more at a root cause level. And that's beautiful. But that doesn't go to address the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of healing. And so, there was, it was called to do that. And it just resonated in me deeply as I was called to that. Like I knew that I had to do that. And the evolution of being able to be in conversation with my doctor colleagues about that's been a lot more difficult for me. Because I can't create some, mechanistic pathophysiologic argument to engage them. It has a lot more to do with relationships to the world and not seeing things transactionally or mechanistically, but seeing them through a lens that the world is alive. And it probably wasn't until, having cancer and feeling like, okay, I have to really step out and begin to express this part of my being. It's essential. And what I find is that there's more receptivity to it in places that I would never guess there was receptivity, and I think some of that for me has to do with, I've created a career that is where I'm credible. I've done some beautiful things in my life as a doctor, as a teacher, as a researcher. And so I think people are willing to listen to me. I had a patient of mine, a young woman, who got breast cancer and then, at 37 and then conceived her child that she'd been trying to conceive. And she had breast cancer and helped her through that journey and was communicating with her. She was asking me about other things she could do with her immune system. And I said, I can see you as a traditional healer, and she looked at it and she said, well, because I trust you, and because you're not making any promises and you're not saying, oh, I'm going to just wave my wand and things are going to be better, but you really are talking about sort of some people who use the word shaman, this Siberian term for traditional healer. There are tea shamans. There are shamans who go to a ayahuasca workshop on a weekend and they think that they have a full understanding of healing. No, it's about deepening the relationships and being able to then be in exchange so that there's sacrifice offerings that are requested by the sacred gifts, and different sacred sites have different gifts to be able to offer, to be able to help. But it's a form of listening and deepening in how I can be of benefit. I'm not sure if I even answered your question.
Yes. Patrick, when we were at dinner a few weeks ago, we were talking about the English language and how we don't have the words to convey a lot of the things that we feel and know they are there, but the language doesn't allow us for a full expression of that. And I'm thinking also about institutions, right? You talked about functional medicine and how it's a translational aspect to bring this more whole understanding of health to a practice, a clinical practice. However, I do see sometimes that the institution, let's say an institution of functional medicine who gives degrees and gives lectures and gives CMEs to students, in a sense operates by the same mechanistic logic of academic, scientific, clinical work. And even when the content wants to show something that it's deeper, that it's not explained by the regular conventional models, the format precludes it to do so, right? Like a language. I know that we cannot jump from a regular school to something unimaginable right now. We need to take steps in that direction. What would be your dreams for the future institutions of these, critical movements that are changing the way we view health in the clinical side? I'm talking about functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, and coaching and other things. But as institutions who educate health professionals, what would be your dreams on how this institution could evolve in how it gathers the community and how it, I wouldn't say train, but it conveys this deeper understanding?
Well, I think one of the big issues is in relationship to trying to be validated within the medical paradigm means that your focus becomes medical, becomes mechanistic, becomes transactional in the process of it. And so, like we focus on physiology and pathophysiology and imbalances and understanding that. And there's no doubt that there's value in that and value in being able to work with our foods, our exercise, movement, sleep, our response to stress in ways that will balance the physiology and help the person to become more whole in ways that are actually proven to be much more effective than drugs. Drugs will suppress the symptoms, but they don't actually help people to live longer, healthier, happier, more joyful. So that's there. Like that's the minimum. But so we're working within a medical paradigm to be able to justify that. But the medical paradigm is really focused on it grows as people are sicker, and it shrinks when people are healthier. So there's no real healthcare paradigm. There's a disease care paradigm that does very well financially as business models in this situation. They speak of traditional Chinese medicine in the past that the doctor, in the community was paid when people were healthy, and he didn't get paid when people were sick. Which makes sense. It's like, well, they have money when they're healthy. They don't have money when they're sick. They're not working. That's a true prevention model that goes on. There's several different aspects to the question. First one, I want to say is like there are some new models that are around what they call like employee stock ownership programs, where if the people who are working in the hospitals actually receive benefit when there's a profit within the healthcare system, and that we can do things to focus on wellness because there's covered lives, so to speak, and they're getting money through the insurance for taking care of people, and they don't have to spend all that money on x-rays and chemotherapy and, high-end, biologic drugs, and they can use that to focus on teaching people how to eat well and gathering in community and having centers and doing that. And the employees of the hospital and healthcare system, disease care system, actually will make more money if through stock ownership there's healthier community, and they're focused on being healthier themselves, because them doing that will actually manifest, an easier relationship to help other people to do it, because it's not conceptual, it's experiential and relational. Well, that's a really cool model to me, in terms of the big aspects. But I want to come back to something different in terms of the systems view of the whole thing. And that is like the view that we have right now is really pretty much just focused on the body and on physiology. So where do we begin to look at what's going on with the emotions, with the thoughts, with the connection to spirit or the sacred, in whatever denomination you want to say? And as we begin to look, I think that there's actually models that can emerge that are saying, well, let's look at, acute care. Western medicine does that really well. My son twisted his ankle last night, thought it might be broken, got the x-ray, it wasn't, got the, the parameters, got the boot, took care of him. He's doing better today, excellent. But in terms of chronic care or chronic disease, what we see is that there are triggers that happen, like an injury, that can then bring back old memories that then create a feed forward process. And there's a reactivity that's going on that's based upon those old experiences. How do we begin to work with processes that recognize that and say, oh, we can actually change that. We can retrain the brain, through the aspect of what's happening in the insula and all the information that's coming from the body and from the gut and in the amygdala of those memories and emotions that they're tagged to, and rewire it so that it doesn't go into that loop of neuroinflammation and of reactivity and decreased cortisol and decreased vagus nerve response and hormonal changes. Like we can see how that happens, but we actually have the ability to do that. But the way to do that is going to be through, being able to, focus on our body, focus on our breath, being present with what's happening in our body, and then caring for ourselves, but caring for ourselves in the context of community and listening and sorting. And, it's sort of the modern day equivalent of sitting around the fire, but we can do that by being in a place where we're practicing yoga together, or, as we saw at the conference we were at, of just dancing together to move our bodies in a way of expression that allowed this beautiful expression to occur. And so I feel like there's ways in which we can transform, but we transform through communities, through relationships, through understanding, through compassionate self-care and community. These are the ways in which we can have a different perspective on a health care system, where we're focusing on health and well-being. And all of the constructs currently are focused on medicine and disease. So how do we change that? Which isn't to say that's wrong. It's just saying like, oh, that's great. It's great in surgery. It's great in acute care. It's great in trauma accidents. It's great in like taking care of a stage 4 cancer, when in balance with all these elements. So it's like, it's not pushing it away. It's just saying like, hey, let's not overstate what that can do. Let's bring the aspects of relationship and community and connection and caring for self and listening to the heart and having courage into the conversation. Now, you asked us, and the additional question is like, well, what are the business models for making that happen? And I think that's actually a fascinating question, because I feel like when we try to create business models to make that happen, it tends to lead towards a amplification of the ego and a separation from community. So there need to be more community-oriented business models to be able to do that. And that's actually very different than the whole way in which Western society is oriented. It's oriented to the self. It's not oriented to the community. And so business models that support community development are what's essential from my perspective on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Since you asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we at some point will have to take that leap of faith of evolving a business model to a more community driven project that will only take us to re-signify what money and profit is. And it's not, I don't think we will have to choose between making money and helping, or I don't like that word, but let me put it the other way. I believe that in terms of business models, like for example, we co-created the Mexican Association of Lifestyle Medicine, and I do see that the future of this institution will deliver what it stands for, as long as we, in a way, think of it as a business that creates its own value and regenerates that powerful energy, which is money, but it really distributes it among the community in efficient and intelligent ways. And that doesn't mean that the people who are doing the work behind the institution won't get paid, which the traditional NGO model would say you won't make that money from that company. But I do believe that if the value is created, there's value for everyone, and it can be transparent, and everyone would agree that this is the best way to do so. Mm-hmm. I know it's difficult, even for me, to put it in words without sounding too communist, right? Because that's another way that we've seen that we're not sure how to handle. But I do believe that through these kinds of conversations and these kinds of walking in both worlds, as you said, can and will provide insights on how to do these things for the future. Because everyone talks about this and needs this. The economic system needs it. The sick people needs it. The environment needs it. So it's just a matter of believing that taking these steps, even if they're very small at this point, it will grow in a new paradigm of business models, quote unquote.
Well, I think the distribution aspect of it is key, but that also goes to, an underlying social cultural dysfunction, and that is that, there's this quest for security and insulation, and I need more in order for it to be okay. And if I don't have more, then I'm at risk. And yet, we know that the phone call could ring at any time, and something could have happened that will change our lives forever. Nothing is certain. And so helping people to feel like, okay, there's a social fabric and a safety net here to be able to help you if something occurs. You don't need to try to figure it out all yourself. You don't need to have all the resources to do whatever you need. You don't need to build a bunker, in case there's a hurricane or a war. You need to be in relationship to each other, and figure out, well, how do we do this together? Because ultimately, as the African proverb says, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk together. And that's what community is. It's allowing us to be on this journey for our lives and the generations to come. And there's going to need to be an awareness around that. When I say embrace uncertainty, is because that's where the aliveness is. That's where the opportunity is for growth and development. And right now, at least in the U.S. culture, and Western Europe, and I see a lot in Mexico as well, and other parts of Latin America, where the people who have been successful monetarily are holding that for themselves rather than sharing that with the communities.
Yes, yes, and this I think takes us to the topic of cancer because, in a sense, cancer has also been described as this disease of isolation and a disease of atomism and individualism and of not understanding that we have been forever. Always interdependent. Like you were talking about asking for help when you started your cancer journey, and asking for help is just the realization that you have been always been receiving help. And for some reason, you believe that you didn't and that you were your own maker of good things rather than relying on everything. And in that sense, well, yeah, let me ask you this. It's a bit a personal question, but I haven't really heard you talk about why do you think, and respond however you want. Why do you think you got cancer? And I'm not trying to be reductionistic or, oh, it was because I ate too much this or that, but what's the story you've been telling yourself about why Dr. Patrick Hanaway had stage 4 cancer?
Well, there's different aspects of it that I could go into, but I think the principal one is in relationship to, the life that I was living was not actually bringing forth the gifts that I need to bring forth in the world, and being able to move and learn and grow and transform into the healer that I was born to be. And that word transformation, it's a curious one because I've used that word with patients with cancer probably for 30 years. I've been a doctor now for, I guess, 37 years, something like that. And I've used it for a long time in that way. And yet, when I had it, I'm like, okay, what needs to be transformed? And transformation, we recall like the transformation of fire burning wood. Well, when it's transformed into heat and light and opportunity for people to gather, it never becomes wood. It is like, oh wait, I'm just going to do it part way. Transformation is like it's a complete change, that's going on, and that's the process that I'm in. But that's what I felt like the question was being called. Are you gonna move in that direction, or are you gonna stay with the view that feeds your ego? You've made some money, people know who you are, they like you, all things look good, but it's not the depth of who you are, and Patrick, that you're hiding something, and and bring it forth, and I'm learning how to do that, and sometimes I do it, and sometimes I forget, and sometimes I get caught back in old patterns. So that's the key part. Now I can wax poetic about, the genetic aspect of curiosity that my uncle and his cousin from an identical twin mother, all of us got the same kind of relatively uncommon laryngeal cancer, that was not related to drinking or smoking or viral infection. So there's probably some genetic component in it. But is it genetic or is it generational? Is it transgenerational? Is it epigenetic? Is it, like, there's a lot there also, but I'm gonna, I could focus on that, but there's really no value in focusing on that other than coming back to that aspect of living my life in a way that is listening in relationship to my true essence, something that, goes back to your first question. I think it's been there all along. It gets articulated through the dominant culture and paradigm, but there was a knowing that was there. And for me, I've had multiple barriers put in the way of like, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not X or Y or Z enough to be able to, become a doctor or do this. And, each one of those barriers, it was like, oh, I'm gonna prove you wrong. I know that I can do this. And it's tapping into that well of connection to the journey that I've been on my whole life and continue to be on. And it unfolds in ways that are more, to use your word, magical. My word, unimaginable, than I would ever guess.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's as intimate as it can be, and at the same time is almost universal. And I think we all hear ourselves in your words and see ourselves in your eyes. There's a humble hope that I have when I started researching about the metabolic theory of cancer and understanding this cancer cell as a cell that in a sense goes rogue out of the systemic interdependent relationship and begins to gather things for itself, right? And then isolate and then destroy the host that gave him life in the first place, meaning the cancer cell. And the hope is also to see this as a metaphor, but also as a literal mirror of our behavior as social beings and as humans who are walking on this earth, also taking everything for their own survival. And that's how we call it, right? We talk about abundance, but it's exploitation, right, of our own body. So my hope is to I think cancer can be a powerful way because it's such a it is a thing that calls so many emotions that resignifying cancer towards this narrative of social and environmental aspects of it, not only the metabolical, genetic, whatever, but also on the big realm, to see it more as this re-recognition of the interdependence and that the stagnation that we've been doing for the past hundreds of years as civilization of not really taking the call for transformation and burning that wood will end up killing us without being frivolous, just logical, right? Myself, I was very scared of the word cancer. And as I started reading from many ways and many aspects of what you could call cancer in the physical body of the person, but also in the environment, in society, I see a true potential there to alchemize that word and to see it not as a foreign invader or as a curse, but rather something that we have done for ourselves, that we are that cancer. And that's not a bad thing. I know it's odd, but it can be understood not as a bad thing if we take that call, if we burn, right?
Right.
I know I'm jumping all over the place,
No, you're
but
not. You're not.
but
And
yeah.
where I go with that is, there's at the individual level, if you will, the cancer whisperer, like, talking to the cancer. What is it? What is your role in my life? What are you teaching me? Like that's then relating to it as an imbalance that is instructive. It's on the dashboard of life. It's saying, okay, hey, there's a big issue here. Come and look at it and pay attention to it and bring it back into balance, as opposed to the Western metaphor of like, well, let's wipe it out and kill it. It's bad. And the same thing then happens at the level of Western culture, of culture itself. That's like, okay, so there's an indication of this growth of things that are out of balance. And what are the messages that are coming? The messages of climate change and hurricanes and weather changes and heating and the changes of cancer that's persisting and the changes and the persistence of heart disease that are there. These are all indicators that things are out of balance. And so we look at them as individuals, and it's also necessary to look at them as a culture to say, well, what are the things that we are doing that are leading to this imbalance, and how do we work to bring that back into balance? Because cancer's a teacher for us. It's telling us something that's going on, and it's actually pointing in the direction of where we need to go if we are willing to listen, as opposed to opposing it, creating it as an us and them dynamic, which is so often happens in medicine these days, where it's about, well, the symptoms are the problem. Let's make the symptoms go away. Let's make the cancer. Let's put a piece of tape over the dashboard light that's telling us that the engine needs looking at, and say, as long as we're not seeing that, then everything is okay. It doesn't work that way. We need to be listening to our body. We need to be listening to the earth and what it's telling us in this way.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And in that sense, I've been thinking a lot about grief and grieving, and been thinking a lot about this. You said we live in these difficult, dark times, and also, as well as with cancer, see the need for dwelling in dark in the dark. In traditional hero's journey, conventional Harry Potter and Star Wars, the dark is the thing you want to avoid. But there's a lot of wisdom in spaces of decay, in spaces of dying, in spaces of uncertainty and silence, right? So I'm also thinking a lot about this and how to re-signify these words, these concepts, these worlds that medicine and wellness and these beautiful words, even the anti-aging movement is like, let's not age, right? Let's not die. So we're doing all these things, but unconsciously we are dividing the world in two, in the black and the white, the good and the bad. And we're just trying to run away from that dark part. And I think that in medicine and even our own life, re-engaging the dark energies can also be regenerating and very needed at a point like this in time, in political, social, and environmental history.
Absolutely needed. Absolutely needed. And in that way, it's like the soul requires that time of darkness and introspection. Just as day goes into night, the world needs the night in order for that regeneration to occur. And we can focus on sleep studies that are around deep sleep and the glymphatic system of moving things forward, and we can create all kinds of understanding of physiology and pathophysiology to justify it. But it's like, it's how the world moves. Let's listen to that. And so the dark, it's challenging, but it also creates the opportunity for a reemergence, for a new day to begin each day. And that sun arising and the light illuminating that brings the spiritual essence to allow for change and growth and emergence to occur. And that transformation from day into night, like that can be difficult, but it's filled with opportunity. And so, we go to old poets and philosophers for thousands of years talking, about that aspect of the darkness is necessary for the regeneration to occur. And so let us not push away from it, but allow ourselves the ability to move into it, to reflect, to grow, to learn, so that we can begin the new day in a way that is bringing our best gifts forward in gratitude, in relationship to all the beings that are present here.
Yes. May it be, my friend. There's a poem. I know you like Mary Oliver, and I wanted to read it to you. And certainly you know it, but let's put it here. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go.
And we
So, yes.
we think about that as life, the arc of one's life, but that happens many, 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 many times inside one's life.
Mhm.
Where that is unfolding. And that's, to me, the beauty. It's like reincarnation isn't just talking about one lifetime. It's talking about like how many Patricks have lived in this body, in this life, and which gives me great hope and optimism for my own life and for the future. Like, we have the ability to be able to transform, to be able to see and do things in a different way. And in fact, we have to right now. So we're being faced with challenges that are bigger and more incredible and more imposing. But that's the way that human beings have done things for a long, long time. So
Yeah, and this
here we
is
are
this is
again.
what powers us. Like, life is this, apoptosis is just dying and rebirthing continuously every second, in our bodies, in our environmental, in the environmental world and everything. So yeah, I think that relocates what medicine also should strive for in that regard, on how to take care of health and create health and be salutogenic, but involving death at all times, and welcoming death at all times. So yes, thank you for reflecting that back and for being courageous to talk about this also as a healer and as a doctor, because these are things that we usually leave for rabbis and priests and shamans, and I think we need to reclaim our right to talk about these things in medical scientific realms.
Mhm. I agree. And in many ways, I have to do this now. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, for having the courage to step in to say, hey, here's a conversation that's not being held. Let's have this conversation. And I so appreciate you, Victor, for your willingness, your courage to be able to step in and do that.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for guiding me and accompanying me and just giving me a smile to say that that's what we should all be doing. So I really appreciate you. I am very honored to be with you, and I'm very grateful for life that connected me to you and to Lisa. And I just hope that we keep creating this. I wouldn't say magic. I'll just say this dance of things that we don't understand and that we probably don't want to understand fully.
Yeah, well, it's not about our mind understanding them. It's about just feeling them and having, gratitude and thanks, for the incredible opportunities and this one precious life that we have.
Thank you, my friend. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure we'll be dancing. We'll be dancing.
Thank you, dear friend.